Hello all and welcome back to Pragati Vichar Literature Festival's Authors Marathon 3.0. Today our theme for the day is self-help and the session's topic is navigating life's maze, integrating career, wellness and personal growth. We are having a wonderful set of panelists today and I can't wait to dive into the conversation. However, let me introduce you all to the wonderful set of panelists we are having. So right off the bat, we are having Miss Neera Maini Srivastav. In Indian National, she has spent 20 significant years in the field of advertising, publishing, and entertainment. MNC agencies like Lois, Saatchi, and Saatchi Percep Gulf in India and overseas, media conglomerates like the Times Group, building brands, telling stories, and penning books, fiction and non-fiction, some of which have been included as curriculum in reputed schools and also adapted to theatrical productions. Having won awards Dubai Links, Power of Print and Abbey, and also acclaim as author, she lives by the adage, I create, therefore I am. Neeraji, it's wonderful to have you here for the session today.
Happy to be here.
So now the second, we are having Mr. Neel Shah. Neel Shah is an experienced sports management professional, ICF certified life coach, educator, and author. He has worked for over 2 decades on the development and commercialization of sports in North America, Asia, and Europe. In 2018, he established the Global Institute of Sports Business. Here, he currently serves as Associate Dean and Head of Counseling. Prior to setting up the institute with India on Track, Neel was the CEO of DSK Shivajians FC and the Liverpool FC International Academy (DSK). Before stepping into professional club management, he served as the business director for Libero Sports, preceding his move to India in 2009. Neel spent 7 years with New York-based Major League Soccer, serving as director of fan development. It's so nice to have you Neel for the session today.
Nice to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Now we are having Mr. Deepak Mehra. Deepak Mehra, an alumni of IIT Varanasi and IMT Ghaziabad, is currently the chief economist and head of investments at a leading bank in Dubai. In his career spanning over 3 decades, he has held leadership position in banks like Citibanks, NA, Credit Suisse, and others, both in India and overseas. He is a coach, a mentor, and a regular speaker at conferences, in podcasts, and on television. Deepak ji, it's so nice to have you for the session today.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here.
Thank you. So now, Hack the Boredom Code by Neera Maini Srivastav, Your Dream Career by Neel Shah, and Think Like a Golfer, Win Like a Golfer by Deepak Mehra. So there's a commonality in all of the three books, which is self-help. So first of all, right off the bat, I would like to ask all of you, what drew you to the self-help genre? Was it like you want to help out others? Was it your personal journey? So what is your personal perception or your personal journey into the genre of self-help? Deepak ji, why don't you start first?
Thank you, Atishay. Yeah, that's a very good question. Look, there are hundreds and thousands of self-help books written, and I'm sure all authors have a reason behind this. For me, it was very simple. It's my own journey of discovery. And like every other normal person, I made a series of mistakes, and those series of mistakes have actually guided me to make progress in life. I actually believe that the obstacle is the way, and you would have heard this very often, and I live by that. So I look forward to obstacles. Obstacles have given me the biggest opportunities, and I think this book is an outcome of my own journey, making mistakes, overcoming those obstacles, and finally finding light at the end of those tunnels.
Right. Neeraj, would love to hear from you as well.
So yeah, I mean, pretty much, when you go through your life, right, there are so many speed breakers and hurdles and turns and twists, right? And when you really begin to listen to them and become aware of them, they really, I think, as Deepak said, they actually are very potent educators by themselves. They teach you a lot and they propel you to really, I think, discover something about yourself that even you didn't know you had, right? And like they say, like all growth happens when at the end of your comfort zone. So I think pretty much that happened. And, when that really happened, I was very passionate and eager to share my experiences or learnings. I mean, am not a master, enlightened master by any standards, but just work in progress, right? But as you go along, it's nice to share, right? Rather than keep all the jewels to yourself. So
Right.
yeah, that really propelled me to get into writing, which was more self-help, and actually it is self-help. Truly, it's really helping yourself, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Neil, why don't you take us further from here?
Yeah, completely agree with what fellow panelists have said. And for me, but also I've been fortunate to experience a lot of joy, a lot of fulfillment, a lot of aliveness in my life and in my work. I wanted to, in my childhood, I was playing a lot of sports. It was doing a lot of adventures, meeting a lot of incredible people, having a lot of great conversations. I thought, okay, how can I just do this and get paid for this as well? And so I started devising a way to make sure I just enjoy my work and find it to be a natural extension of who I am. So I thought that was the best form of self-help, because I figured that if I'm going to be doing this for 8 to 16 hours a day, I might as well enjoy it as much as possible. So what for me self-help is, and what I've shared in my book as well, is that it's not about being happy all the time. By all no means, it's impossible. It's about knowing that you don't need to suffer for too long, knowing that you're not stuck in anything. So taking a step back and saying, okay, this is not working for me. What can I do to make it work for me? What pivots can I take? What decisions can I make? Or what self-acceptance or acceptance of the situation? So a lot of the book talks about, in a lot of my life's journey and other people I've coached, is that, yeah, we're going in life, we're trying to find aliveness and joy and fulfillment in our work. We create it or not. But if either way, how do we continue to make decisions where we get out of feeling stuck or suffering? And we, on the other side of that, is joy and fulfillment and aliveness potentially. So I feel like that's a form of self-help, just letting yourself know that, hey, I'm looking out for you, and I'm gonna make sure that we get through this together.
Right. What lovely answers from all of you. So now, right, my second question to all of you would be, so in your diverse experiences, can you highlight instances where incorporating storytelling or literary practices has visibly impacted an individual or a group's mental resilience or personal growth? Neeraji, why don't you start?
Yeah, so, I can think of, the very first book that I wrote, The White Crow. It was an allegorical fiction, but I wanted it to be accessible to, as many people as possible. And, I had this idea that why can't I, launch it in a Braille edition? So even the visually impaired, how would they consume a story like that, right? And it was a fascinating experience because, one of them who read the book in Braille, uh, she actually turned around and said, your story, it's a story only about crows. It's a story about a crow that's born white in the land of black crows. And then what happens? And, Crow uses his gift to really redeem the land, right? Uh, and she actually turned around and said that, I read this book and I at the end of it, I feel so positive about my life and, my own acceptance of the way I am is like 10x, right? And that to me was the greatest high. It's not the reviews, it's not, the sales and all of that, right? It's about your book being able to, or your story being able to do something for someone. Uh, and it's a very intrinsic journey, right? So that for me was a great experience on how just a story, a very simple story, actually created a somewhat shift in a person's inner being, right? So for me, that was an amazing, fascinating experience. And also talking of stories, right? I mean, they always present new perspectives, new emotions, and in fact, they're opportunities for self-reflection, right? Uh, and I think even Devdutt Patnaik, if you see, he has used mythology uh, to tell so many stories, whether it's corporate culture, it's leadership, it's success. I mean, they're all stories from mythology, they're characters who stand for certain qualities. So, yeah, I mean, for me, stories can really do a lot to, change and transform a state of being. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Like what I believe is a positive feedback from a reader is what fuels an author to write more and more.
So, you know,
Neil,
it's
yeah.
sorry, it's really not about hey, I love the way you write, you know,
Hmm.
or your craft. It's about you know, I was feeling this, and when I read the book, I am here. You know,
Hmm.
that journey and graph is the most exciting outcome of a book for me. Yeah.
Right. Neil, why don't you take us further from it?
So earlier, Deepak had mentioned The Obstacle is the Way, and that's a book, also a title of a book by Ryan Holiday, and it's a very famous book that I'm sure Deepak Ji has read as well. And the whole book is just stories of different figures and how they've been able to overcome certain challenges. And that book has become one of the more popular books out there in the world. And because of, I think, the storytelling aspect. So I feel like in this age of so much information from Instagram, from LinkedIn, from TV, from whatever it is, just concepts is hard for us to grasp. We need to package it in a way that we understand. And so I think humor and storytelling really work. It's worked for centuries and you know, for thousands of years, I'd say. And so for me, when I teach courses, I teach a course called Self-Discovery. It's basically helping students figure out their passion, their superpowers, and their purpose, and turn it into their careers. And I use a lot of humor and a lot of stories, and stories from my life, stories from other people's lives. My book is filled with that, and I would say it does three things. One is it shows a principle in practice. What you know, whatever I'm trying to say, it's like, here's an example, and not just my example, many other people's example. And then, as I said, it's engaging. A story is, if you're a good storyteller, it's going to be engaging. And I think the third one is it's relatable. It's very easy to come into any room and say, you know, turn your passion into your profession, or you know, have integrity, or whatever it might be. But the reality is, these are just words. Like, they're not necessarily pregnant with anything beyond just some advice. But if we can turn it into a story, make it engaging, show that we've also gone through this, we're also human, it somehow sticks a lot more on the other side. So I try to use story and humor as much as possible.
Right. Deepak, your take on this?
Yeah, I would just like to add absolutely what Neera and Neel have mentioned. Uh, I believe in the same. And for me, I think the understanding the concept and the power of storytelling comes from the historical stories that we used to read as children, you know, Panchatantra, Jatak Kathas, and so on. We used to read in Amar Chitra Katha,
Hmm.
small little stories. And what I realized is that those stories, even though they used to be simple animal stories or simple day-to-day life stories, conveyed very big and deep messages. Uh, of course, based on our Panchatantra and Jatakatha, later on Aesop fables were developed and became very famous around the world. And so the best messages in the world have always been conveyed through stories. So I don't think we need to reinvent uh, uh, the concept of conveying a message. And a self-help book is all about conveying your own message that you've discovered. And they can, therefore, nothing be better than a storytelling route if you have to convey it. Historically, that's been the only route available.
Hmm. Right. I actually very much align with all of your personal opinions and the views. With that, we come to our next question, which is self-help books often aim to inspire change. How can themes explored in your particular books inspire readers to infuse variety and joy in their routines, even with limited time? Are there methods or strategies from your work that reflect this pursuit? For instance, I think Deepak ji and Neil ji, you both have a commonality, which is sports, like football and golf. So, what do you think about this particular question? So, when struck with the life's daily task, like being in a corporate job or being a busy businessman, so how can we incorporate certain practices which actually provide us joy? Deepak ji, why don't you take us from here?
Okay, sure. Uh, Look, I think games are the closest to life. And in particular, I found golf to be very closely linked to the life that we live. Actually, being on a golf course and playing, the 18 holes or 9 holes or whatever you're doing on the golf course is is probably the closest that you get to living a life. Uh, and and I think that was my motivation because golf really stands out in terms of games, and how different it is from others, and we can talk about it later. But then every aspect of the game, whether it is planning before you actually hit the ground, every hole is of a different shape, different terrain. So you can't just go there and start playing. It's not like football or hockey, every field will look the same. So it's not there in case of golf. So you need a lot of planning. And the same is true in life. I mean, we have to be very good in execution, but we can't start without planning. So those are the sort of things that resonate in real life, in the corporate world, whether you are an employee or an entrepreneur or anyone trying to achieve anything in life. So there are messages like these which I have got from golf, planning being one of them, basically clarity of purpose, clarity of planning before you start any venture. The second one for me has been very big, has been the courage. The courage is the courage to let change happen, the courage to take risks. And every golf shot, it's a tiny ball, less than 2 inches. And the golf course is like, every hole is like 400, 500 yards. So imagine how far you have to take this tiny ball and how accurate you have to be, saving yourselves from all the hazards on the golf course. So you need to take a lot of risk, and you need to trust the process, and you need to trust your abilities, and then go for it, go for the change whenever it comes in our life. So like that, there are 7 lessons that I have learned from the game of golf, and that's what the book is about, is discovering those 7 life lessons from this ancient game. And for me, that relates very closely to whatever we do in our lives.
Right. Neil, your take on this?
Yes, I mean, games, sports, anything, arts, whatever it is, I think it's important for us to go back to our childhood. And a lot of my book, a lot of my teaching does that. Those, and just remember what it feels like to feel alive, to feel engaged, to feel curious, enthusiastic. I think these are terms or these are experiences that, as we get older, depending on our life structure, our inner critic, our inner wiring, we sometimes get minimized. So I mentioned earlier that in the book, the crux is the passion, finding your superpower and finding your purpose, and then bringing those together and starting to identify potential vocations that align with all 3. Passion, it starts with passion. Passion is really important because it's that element that allows you to be excited to get up in the morning, to go do that job, to talk to that client, to create that plan, whatever it might be. If you have passion for the product or the service or the environment that you're working in, it's a lot easier to get up and kind of do it with joy. And in terms of practices, one of the things I talk about in the book is, we a lot of times we go off of our cognitive intelligence, which is our mind, or our emotional intelligence, but we're not always looking at our somatic intelligence. That's our body knowledge. And so we might assess something, do I like that or not, just by our mind or by our heart? But the reality is, a lot of times, the real information, the real wisdom is going to come from our body. It's going to tell, we walk into a situation, we walk into a conversation, we walk into a project is offered to us. We can feel into ourselves, and we can say, hey, is this feeling right or is not feeling right? And I just try to work with my readers in that way, or my clients as well, as based on what the world is teaching us and presenting to us, how do we start to discern what is actually in line with what's going to bring us more joy and fulfillment and aliveness, and what's going to just be something that might sound good or give us more of a security blanket around us. So coming back to it, passion is at the core of my teaching, and checking in with yourself, checking with your body is a very good method to figure out whether or not this is aligned or not aligned.
Right. Neeraj, would love to hear from you as well.
So my book, Hack the Boredom Code, like I think Neil mentioned, you need to give a proof of a certain, idea or an ideology, right? So my book, I really never wanted it to be philosophy and all those heavy concepts and all of that. I wanted to move beyond concept to our lives the way they exist today. Uh, from the time I wake up in the morning till my when I hit the sack, right? I want that every hour. I wanted, every hack in the book. It's called Hack the Boredom Code. I wanted every hack to be so relatable. So while they are hacks, to me, I see them as little stories, right? So one of the hacks is talk to an inanimate object, or read something you read as a 3-year-old. Go back to that. Like I think Deepak mentioned, those stories that are still somehow they can evoke something in you, which you perhaps have forgotten, right? In your life, right? So my book is a very practical how-to kind of a book, and deliberately steered clear of any philosophies and all of that. I just wanted somebody to pick up the book and run with it, and make a difference in the day, right? So there are about 150 ideas to deal with boredom. And the way I've split it is mind, body, spirit. So there's always something that you will be able to pick up and want to do, right, for that day to kill boredom. So that's the way I see it. And, so it's a very practical how-to kind of a book that I deliberately set out to curate, you know.
Right.
Also what happens is if you're on the self-help area, there is a tendency to kind of sermonize and, talk about the very, very lofty things and ideas and concepts. But sometimes, and I'm part of it, you kind of tend to forget your real life. What are the real challenges that I'm facing? And why isn't anyone talking about that, right? So I always had that as a filter, for my book.
Right. Just a question that came up from in my mind. So I do understand that most of you would be definitely busy with your regular day job and your course. So Neeraji, what would be like your personal favorite hack or to cure your boredom?
So for me, I think I'm obsessive about learning new things. Whether it's a craft, whether it's a new language or it's a new modality, anything that's new really excites me. So whenever I know I'm hitting that space, I always pick up something that I know nothing about. So for me, that's how it kind of dispels that state.
Right. Deepakji, what would be your hack aside from golf?
Yeah. So I think I don't experience boredom very often. Actually, it's missing in my life, I guess, because I have a very packed life at home and at work. And given the sort of job that I do, of being an economist, for me, the markets are open around the world, and I keep track of that because I need to write after that, and I need to give my opinions. So I've seldom faced boredom. I do look forward to boredom very often, because it's when you are sometimes bored that some new ideas crop up in your mind. So like Neeraji said, that you need to look for new stuff when you're bored. And for me, when I'm very bored, which is not very often, new ideas do come to my mind. So I really look forward to those times when I have nothing to do and I plan to do nothing. And those are great moments in reality.
Right. Neelji, your take.
Yeah, I also don't get bored very often. There's so many things to do, so in experience and think about. But I go for a walk typically. I like to listen to podcasts, and usually if I'm getting bored or I feel like there's some boring thing in my mind, like I have to wash the dishes or I have to do like some organizing, I just put my headphones on, listen to a really interesting podcast or a story, an Audible book or something, and then I'll just start doing things around the house. So it's a mixture of like I don't let myself get bored, even though I agree with Deepakji. Inside of boredom, a lot of new ideas come out, and I probably should let myself my wife always says, stop always having to do something, or stop trying to maximize every minute of the day. So I can't just do one thing. I have to like do two things at the same time, which I know is not always the best. But yeah, I find listening to a book or listening to a podcast or going for a walk just really works for me.
Right. So with that, we come to our next question, which is, in your books, how do you address the practical challenges individuals face, particularly those dealing with financial constraints or social isolation, when attempting to make transformative changes in their lives? So, a lot, like when we're talking about this generation, there's a lot of financial constraints as well as a social isolated. People are not as social, like there's definitely rise of social media apps like Instagram or Facebook. However, people are not as much social as they used to be before. I do remember my grandparents telling the stories of how they used to, like how the whole colony used to watch match together, sleep together, and whatnot. So, what's your take on this, Neeraji? Why don't you start first?
So, I've kind of worked so extensively, in this young adult space, right? Also having to interact with them and having written for them. Also taught, writing for brands, for an institute, and therefore, interfacing with the youngsters. I think, also getting them to understand that, you're not a victim, that whole victimhood of life, that I am a victim and, things are just happening to me. Rather than me having the choice, right? The power of choice to really make my life happen, right? That itself, is sadly missing from our entire education system. And they've kind of bought into this idea that, I am the pity pot, right? And I have many constraints. So the word constraint itself, if someone can really eliminate that from their lives, right? That would be a huge plus, because then they will really understand that they really have infinite possibilities in their lives, even if there is a financial challenge or whatever it may be. But it's you making that choice, right? To surmount that. And we all know that, what you believe, you attract what you are, right? So, bringing that into their consciousness is, I feel, the greatest task. And a couple of occasions when I've managed to do that, I think the results have been amazing. It's as if, a new person has come alive, right? So that whole, conversation itself of limitations, I think that needs to go away, right? Only then you will really be able to claim who you are and, be able to achieve whatever you want to, right? So I try to do that through my books, right? And also a couple of one-on-one sessions. But that's really the crux, it's not about, and yes, social isolation, because we're living in this whole over digital, overwhelmingly, device taking over humans, right? So, yes, I think Neel, you mentioned, that emotional intelligence that needs to really develop, because, I mean, how many youngsters have you seen who can really hold a conversation with you by just looking in your eyes? They will have that need to fidget or, look away. And so there isn't that emotional intelligence which is allowed to develop, unfortunately, because of the lives that we are living today. But having said that, yes, there has to be that attempt to get outdoors, connect with nature, you know, uh, be more with humans, right? To understand what living in a human world is all about. So I think, yeah, those are things that will really get them out of that
Right.
space. Yeah.
You have to get out of your screen time and be, more engrossed with your surroundings and observe more and to learn more.
So it's an irony, right? In a highly connected world, they are disconnected,
Right.
and that needs to be addressed, right? In a more
Right.
positive way. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Neilji, your take on this?
Um, so it's very tricky to when I'm writing a book about finding your dream career, I have to also take into account I grew up in California. I had abundance around me. I've had a lot of privilege in my life, and so I had to be very, very sensitive to that, because I don't want to just put out a book and saying, yeah, do whatever you want, and not take into account that not everyone has had the same sort of support, financial support that I've had, or families have different needs as well. And so I really, really thought through kind of what message am I presenting? Am I taking into account different people's backgrounds? And I'd say this is that one of the one of the benefits I've had about living in different parts of the world and working in different parts of the world and being, a kind of a guy living in a tiny studio for a lot of my life, and just trying to kind of make ends meet, to being a CEO and doing that, and leaving a lot of things and moving to India and all that, is that you start to realize that there's not one way. I think we wake up, a lot of us, and we feel like finances have to go this way. Like we have to keep accumulating more assets. We have to keep accumulating more. Did I lose you? Sorry.
No.
Oh, okay, sorry. I think it was a little bit frozen. We have to keep accumulating more assets. We have to keep accumulating more profile. We have to keep, and that's the only, that's the route to success. So one of the things I ask all my readers and my students, but especially people who are a little older, to say that, hey, how much do you really need? Like, be honest with yourself. So that sense of honesty, that sense of asking, do I really need crores? Or am I chasing it because that's what's supposed to be? Because I've seen, when I was at my happiest, not always the time when I was making the most money. I was at my happiest when I was really engrossed in the people, in the projects that I was kind of around, and I was living in alignment with my core self, like the things that really matter. And for me, lots of money has never really been a big thing that mattered. Two is that when it comes to isolation too, it's like we're watching Instagram or TV shows and you see people and cool parties or doing this, and it's easy to say, I want to be that person. I want to do this. But one of the things I've done, why I became a life coach, is I wanted to help people understand their wiring. Because if you understand your inner wiring, you realize that not everyone needs so many people around them. Now, you get exhausted if you're an introvert. You're drained. Not everyone needs so much social stimulation. You actually, why are we chasing it? Why do we feel like our life there's a gap if we don't have this amount in our bank account and this amount of many friends or people calling us? Let's actually understand what we need. So the Enneagram or the Berkman test, or there's lots of tests that are out there that help us figure out what do we really want and what do we need more than we want. And if we can design our life accordingly, you start to realize that those things, like lots of friends and lots of money, it really is not for everyone. It's okay if it happens. It's okay if it doesn't happen. But maybe more importantly is lots of purpose, or lots of play, or lots of alone time or me time, or lots of learning new things. That could actually bring more joy than a huge bank account and a great social network.
I very much align with you, definitely. Deepak ji, your take on this?
Yeah, I fully agree with what Neera ji and Neel ji just said, and I think so. Even though my book is conveying messages through what I learned through golf, you don't need to be playing golf to read this book. That's very important. So, because somehow the impression is that golf is a game for the elite and so on. It's not actually. Golf is a wonderful game, and you don't need to be playing it to be reading this book. Actually, the book also teaches a bit of golf and tells you how the gameplay actually is set out in golf, which is very different from other games. And then the lessons that it teaches you. So on the subject that you've just mentioned, one of the key things in golf is you play where the ball lies. And the ball can land up anywhere. It could land up in a sand pit. It could land up in the rough. It could land up very nicely on the green. And that is the reality. And you do your best. The ball lands up wherever it has to. There are so many factors like the wind, the altitude you took, and various other moisture and so on. But eventually, you play from where the ball lies, and that's exactly in the real life. You have to accept the reality, and then move on. Now, obviously, my book doesn't delve into the aspect of helping people who have given up on life. Unfortunately, I haven't touched that aspect. My book deals with people who haven't given up on life, who want to make it, who want to become successful. One of the key things that golf teaches us is integrity. Golf is a game which does not have umpires and referees walking with you, unlike other games where umpires and referees are watching. Sometimes third camera, there are cameras all over watching you, whether you're playing with integrity or not. In golf, there are none. There are rule officers who are there in the game, and you can consult them that, look, this is what has happened, what can I do next? But finally, you hit the ball, it's your ball. You decide where to hit it from next time. If you break the rules, there's no one who's going to watch you. So that's a very big learning from the game of golf, that the means are sometimes more important than the ends that you achieve. So focusing on the means, that's why it's called the gentleman's game. And very often we see people cheating even in golf, because it's very easy to cheat. No one is going to watch you over 18 holes. The whole distance is like in number of kilometers all across. So impossible to put cameras and check. So I think that's where it is. We focus on the means. We look at ensuring that we follow the right means, have confidence in yourself. And those are the things that take you higher in life. And one of the other things that golf teaches very, very significantly is that take it easy in life. Don't be harsh on yourself. And I think that is one of the lessons that the youth have to understand, because they get so much of signals all around, the stimulus, and they want to achieve everything very quickly. So the game of golf is telling us that you have to be walking towards your goal. There is no running or chasing in golf. And that's exactly in life. You have to be walking towards your success. You can't be chasing success. And I think if the young people understand that lesson, life becomes much more easier.
Right. After listening to you about the golf, I resonate with the golf ball. Like that, life throws you everywhere. It lands you in sandpits, it lands you in greens. However, you have to be, vigilant in your journey and reach the end, like how a golfer does. So, with that, I want to talk about the physical and the mental health. So, when self-care often brings to mind skincare of physical health, how do you see the link between mental well-being and the broader concept of self-care? And additionally, what simple practices can individuals adopt to prioritize both their mental and the physical well-being? So, Neelji, why don't we start first?
So for me, when I wrote my first book on wellness for young adults, I split it into mind, body, spirit. And there's a reason for that, because I think these three are so interconnected. You cannot separate the body from the mind, or from, or from the soul or spirit or whatever you call it. Ultimately, it's a balance of all three, right? Which contributes to well-being, right? So you can't be only looking after, just your mind and ignore the body, right? A simple example is your breath, right? Even your breath changes with the kind of emotional state that you are in, right? That itself is the biggest proof of our mind-body connection. So having said that, I think each needs to be addressed and nurtured, right? You can't ignore one. And I was in a session, on a one-to-one session, and was talking to this youngster, and he said, I don't have the time. There's too much to do. They're overwhelmed with these gratitude journals and, all of that. And so I said, yeah, just, you need to simplify it, right? It's not about a to-do list that you have to do to achieve well-being, right? And you go for a walk in the morning, just bring your mind to an awareness of just a feeling of gratitude, right? For your body, right? For the environment, for the birds, the trees, all of it's making that walk possible, right? And pleasurable. I said, just that feeling of gratitude, integrate that into that, that one simple act of daily life. That itself that's integration, right? You don't need to have a separate slot, right, to pay your gratitude to whatever that you want in life, right? So that's how I teach integration, right? Because I think only when you integrate the three does it become a natural habit. It has to become your nature. It shouldn't be that you have to impose it on yourself. So yeah, and ultimately, even just smiling at anyone who crosses your path, right? That's part of mindfulness, right? That's how you really nurturing every aspect of your being. So for me, yeah, the three have to work in tandem,
Right,
and it
Deepak
has to
ji.
be a close, natural integration.
Yeah. So Deepak ji, your take on this?
So I think for me, the balance in life is probably the biggest rocket science that exists. A lot of people call themselves successful, but they have lopsided successes because that is what is visible to the world. Somebody becomes a very successful entrepreneur, somebody becomes a very successful professional, somebody becomes a very successful player or whatever. I think what is hidden sometimes behind that is whether this is balanced or not, whether that success is also visible on in the other aspects of that person's life. For example, in the family life, uh, and uh, and that's where the rocket science comes. It's very easy to have lopsided success because you leave the focus on everything else, focus on one aspect of your life. Obviously, that will become successful. Uh, but to have a balanced success is very difficult, and I think there are many lessons that the game of golf has in this aspect as well, and I've covered it, in the book again through stories and so on. So I think that for me is the crux of self-help. It's not just taking one aspect of your life and becoming very good at that. It then masks various other failures, which go, which are collateral damage to lopsided success.
Right, Neel ji, your take on this?
Yeah, I think as Neera ji was talking about, and Deepak ji, the importance of having some diversity in your life. Of course, bringing in things that activities that engage your mind, body, and soul, like journaling, meditation, yoga, or exercise, or a little bit of plays. I think having some aspects of that, elements of that in your life is always important. That's also been for thousands of years. People have talked about. We've come back to the same thing. We could have all the technology in the world. We could have all the luxuries in the world, but ultimately, everything, a lot of what is really nourishing our mind, body, and soul is coming back to the same thing. So find out what works for you and design that into your life. The second part of it, and something a concept I've talked about in the book, is understand the difference for you of what is luxury and what is an investment. And what I mean by that is that when we all have some money or time to invest in some, or put into something, let's say. And a lot of times we choose as human beings, we choose it in luxury. And luxury might be, it could be like some sort of object that we want to buy, or it could be even something that may not necessarily lead to, there's a law of diminishing returns. So it might feel good for a little bit, but it kind of goes away. I find self-care to be like, I've always been, people joke with me or say that, oh, you're just going to retreats all the time. Like, don't you want to just go to the beach and chill? I'm like, yeah, I also go to the beach and chill, but I like to go to these retreats. I like to go to a Vipassana. I like to go to, a workshop or different things, because what's happening is that I'm learning something new. I'm growing and reflecting and expanding, and I'm connecting with people. I'm meeting people in that space. When I spend a lot of money on an object, or if I spend a lot of money on just, a holiday where I'm just going to eat and drink a lot, there's nothing wrong with it. And I don't judge people who do it. I've done it a lot, but I've noticed that there is a couple of days it might be fun, then it starts to feel empty. When I come home, I'm feeling even emptier. So when I think of self-care, I think of, are we making decisions that are serving and feeding our higher self? And that's going to be different for every single person. For some people, going to Hawaii and eating and drinking a lot is actually serving their higher self. That's complete. But I know what serves my higher self, or what serves some kind of the side of me that's going to have more nourishment, and I know what serves the side of me that's going to feel like depleted even after I invest all that time and money into it. So I choose the things that have longer lasting impact.
Right. After listening to all of your answers, one thing that I wanted to ask particularly to each of you is, what does success mean to you? So is it like wealth, happiness, or like what does it actually comes down to when you're talking about success? Deepak ji, like this came to me when I was listening to particularly to your answer. So why don't you start first?
I think for me, success is when you are able to achieve and fulfill your potential. Uh, and an unfulfilled potential is the biggest sign or indication of being unsuccessful. So, and then I also believe that we are born with infinite potential. Each one of us is just how much of effort that you want to put in to fulfill all the potential that lies in you. In fact, the whole purpose of self-help books is to bring out all these potentials that we have within us. So whether what Neeraji's book is telling us, or Neel's book is telling us, or my book is telling, these are just small aspects of the fulfillment of that potential. And so for me, the success is not measured by any material gains. They are likely to follow as a byproduct if you are fulfilling your inherent potential. And inherent potential is infinite, by the way. So keep learning, keep stretching yourself, keep exploring newer and newer aspects of your life, and you will find magic unfolding at all times. This is what I believe in. And that for me is success.
Right. Neeraj, your take on this?
So for me, when I really can have the courage to be myself, whatever that self is, free from everyone else's judgments, points of views, opinions, and when I can really, be happy with that and can show up as me, right? Everywhere, whether in my relationships, at work, when I can really do that, stripped of everything else and all the masks and filters, for me, that's success, and it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of courage to really be that. It's like somebody asked me, when did you last show up in your life? And that really got me thinking, am I living my own life, or am I living somebody else's view or opinion or, judgment of how my life should be, right? So when I'm free of the shoulds, that's when I would really feel I'm successful.
Hmm. Right. This question has actually got me thinking as well. So yeah, Niels, your take on this.
It would be a combination of both, I'd say, for me, because it's the authentic taking that time to really have that self-realization. Who am I? What is my authentic self? What are my gifts? And then, as Deepak said, offer them in the world. Reach your full, like, what are we meant to be? Trying to understand some of our purpose, you could say it, or what is our offering in the world, and just find ways to shine that light through any platform or medium you can, and do it on a regular basis. I find that in that way of life, you feel a lot more joy and fulfillment in that process.
Right. So with that, we come to the last question for the session, and then we shall be moving on to the individual questions now. So with that, unraveling life's puzzle is undeniably stressful, especially for the younger generation. In your opinion, what do you think youngsters today grapple with such confusion about their careers? Could it be linked to tendency to grow bored with one pursuit and seek new challenges easily? Neil, why don't you start first?
Yeah, in a lot of ways I feel sorry for younger generation, and it's just there's so much. So there's a book that I read about a year ago called 4,000 Weeks, and it's a really incredible book. It's almost like goes the opposite way of an Atomic Habits or some other books that are out there, like 4 Hour Work Week. It's basically trying to say that in this attempt to have more freedom in our lives, to get everything done so we have more space, it's not always a guarantee that it's going to lead to joy and peace. because there's in all of that space, we don't even know, we could just keep filling it with more things, or there's more FOMO, you know, fear of missing out. There's a lot of that. So I feel like the younger generation right now, a lot of people in the younger generation, because of how much content they have access to at their fingertips, it's so easy to get pulled in 1,000 different directions, and every influencer is showing you an amazing life that they're living in very short snippets. And then, of course, you see young millionaires and billionaires because they've set up their startups that have been funded. How can you be a normal child anymore? Like, you got, like we're saying, you know what, I just want to find what makes me happy and just do that, whether I'm a billionaire or I'm getting paid to promote products in Hawaii or, you know, the Greek islands. It's okay. Like, I'm still doing all right in life. And that is where mentorship is really important. That is where, you know, having role models, doing a lot of inner work is important, so we can drown out the noise. We can appreciate what's going on out there and get inspired by it, no problem. But let's not try to wear all of those garments ourselves, because the second you do that, it's going to get really heavier and you're going nowhere. And I think that's something that when I work with people, especially younger people, I just try to help them come back and celebrate who they are. Like, what makes them unique? What makes them special? What is it that makes them feel alive? Like, what do they like to wake up and do in the daytime? And then how do we bring more of that into their lives? And usually it helps them stay focused on that track versus getting so caught up in everything else. We all do. Like, we can't just completely drown out. We're surrounded by it unless we're in a cave. But I think that's really important to stay true to who you are and be okay with that and celebrate that.
You know, being a member of the younger generation, I can definitely resonate with your answer, and I definitely respect what about the things that you mentioned about, you know, the billionaires or the millionaires influencing the younger generation. Often at times we do feel struggle, like if a, you know, a member of the younger generation, or if my coworker or if anybody of mine is doing well, and why are we stuck here? So Deepakji, why don't you take us further from?
Yeah, I think this is a very common issue, and I think I'm covering that in actually my first part of the book itself, first chapter, where goal setting is so important in life. Having the clarity of plan, purpose. Now it's easier said than done, but there are processes, and I've covered one of the processes over there, which is called the Warren Buffett process, and it's a very simple process. Which first you should list down all your goals. So write down whatever comes to your mind. You want to become a multimillionaire. You want to have, you know, 1 million followers. You want to have this, that. Write all of them down. That's fine. So I think, and I use that with youngsters as well. So okay, you have so many goals. Let's write all of them down. Then start picking out. Let's pick out, you know, the 3 top goals. If you have to select from this list, what would be the top 3 goals that you would like to focus on, which are achievable, tangible goals? And we take those 3 out of the list of 20, 30, whatever you've written. So now comes the interesting part. So fine, we've got our 3 goals and we should focus on those 3 goals. That's very simple, and that should lead you to success. But what do you do with your other 17 goals which are in the list? And that's where Warren Buffett tells us that if you have to achieve those 3 goals, you know, by and large, we would say, okay, those 17 goals are on the back burner. I'll start thinking of them, you know, or put less effort on those 17, put more efforts on these 3. But actually, the process is that you have to eliminate goals. So you have to completely eliminate those 17 goals if you ever want to achieve the 3 goals of your life. After you've achieved your 3 goals, you can go back and start drawing another list of 20 goals. But the elimination of goal process is very important. And I think the youngsters have to understand that, fine, the world is your oyster. You can achieve all these 20 things, but let's focus on achieving the 2 or 3 top things. And then do not focus on achieving the remaining 17. Otherwise, you'll get confused. You will spread yourself thin. You will end up not achieving any. This is the key message that we have to, you know, that I'm also mentioning in my book, and I think that's the key learning which I try to convey to youngsters when I'm sitting with them.
Neeraj, your take on this?
So coming from, I think both of you, Deepak and Neel, have really, nailed it. And like Neel said, I also really, my heart goes out to this generation that has inherited this, thing of living an Insta-worthy life. There is so much of need for validation, right? In everything they do, whether it's a hobby class that they go to, or, it's academics, it's a career choice. There seems to be so much burden uh, where they're not even free to choose what they want to do. And I remember, doing a session at one of the schools, and I didn't have anything in mind. And they'd invited me to talk about my books. And I went there and I said, listen, I don't want to talk about my books. Can I just have some fun with them? uh, and the session was, it was just about telling them, listen, this, you're not going to be judged or assessed on this. This is just a session for you to do whatever that you want to do. And we got on to, creating stories. And the moment I said that, there was there was a complete lift of, a huge burden, right? And post that, the kind of stories and ideas that these kids came up with were mind-boggling, because they didn't have that burden, right? Okay, I have to live up to the expectation of, so and so, and I'm going to be assessed on how I think and, what I write. So that itself, I mean, it was a learning and an insight for me as well. Like, what a simple thing of releasing judgment can actually do for the youngsters, because they have enough that they're dealing with. And that is kind of really fatiguing them, which is why they're, they're not focused, right? They don't know what it is to be centered anymore. So, like Neel said, there's a lot of inner work that needs to go into that, right? For them to be able to make those choices and, stick to those, right? And work towards that. Currently, they're just so distracted, easily distracted by everyone
Hmm.
else's choices and opinions, because they've never been taught to, be centered. So yeah, I think that needs to be worked upon. Uh, and they really have a far more challenging time than we did. So yeah.
Yeah, right. Since we have already talked about the younger generation, one thing or like one input that I would like all of you to do would be, what would be your advice from your current self to your younger version? Like Deepak ji, like your current job as an economist, what would be your advice to your past self who just started about economics? So Neera ji, why don't you start first?
My advice to my younger self would be, I think, just dissolve limitations, whether it's in your mind, whether it's in your environment, whether what you perceive as limitation. I think just dissolve limitations and move ahead, like Deepak said, I mean, really embrace the infinite part of you, which you've never addressed, right? You've never seen yourself as an infinite being. So see yourself as possibility for everything.
Right. Deepak ji, your take on this.
Oh, look, so we spoke about fulfilling our potential. So I think that part is still easy to convey, and the infinite potential all of us have. The difficult part for me has been, through my journey, has been to take it easy in life, and don't be harsh on yourself. And it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay not to be successful at all times. It's okay to be slower. And I think that's where my personal learning has been. That's the last part of my book as well, which is basically, please, smell the roses on the way. Can't be life. Life can be tough, but it doesn't mean that you can't take it easy.
Right. Neil ji, your take on this.
I mean, in a lot of ways, I've followed this, but it'd still be a good reminder to my younger self is that relationships are really important. So as you go through your career, like it's something I try to share with everyone, and it's something I try to do is like lead with love with everyone, like with your people, your staff, your people around you, whoever it is. Just try to bring a lot of love. I think we're missing love in our world, in our lives. We need it more. And so even as professionals in whether it's economics or whether it's finance or sports management or anything else. I think it's okay to take it easy a little bit and be a little kind, even though you can still be productive and effective and get things done and beat the competition, no problem, but try to find love in the process.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing such wonderful advice. I definitely believe it has helped me and will definitely help our listeners as well. With that, I come to the specific question that I have prepared for each of you. Starting off with Mr. Neil. So you mentioned giving up everything to move to India and contribute to its sports industry. Taking such a bold step, did you experience fear or self-doubt about starting anew and building everything from scratch?
Hmm. Yeah, this is something I hear quite often, and it's something I also felt at the time. Is that it's actually people say, well, you were in New York, you had your dream job, you were working in this professional soccer league, traveling the world, getting paid really well at a young age, and how come you left everything to move to India? You don't know anybody in this country, you don't speak Hindi, you don't know, you don't need I never grew up in Indian culture, I didn't know much about it. I've never been to India in my life. And you're leaving everything to move to this country, and you're going to promote soccer, and you're going to get paid probably 10% of what you're making in America and living as an Indian employee, not as an expat. And I said, yeah, but because I was thinking it's riskier for me to stay in the position that when I look upwards, it's no longer the next position for me at Major League Soccer was the head of marketing. And that wasn't exciting for me. It was doing things that are outside of my passion, my purpose, and my strengths. And I looked at other leagues and I was like, fine. But I wanted to come to India and help give back to what was given to me, which was growing the sport that has made such a difference in my life. I wanted to offer more opportunities for young kids in India to be able to play in safe and engaging places. So I was clear about that. Now, it was a risk, yes, but it was a very calculated risk. I started doing all the steps. So then what's very important in our lives is we keep taking self-inventories. Okay, I'm 29 years old and I have my MBA in sports management. I've worked for 7 years in the highest levels of professional sport. I have done lots of work on communication skills at executive programs. I've learned, these skills of softwares and all that. I'm very resilient. I have a good attitude. I'm nice to people. I make relationships really well. So, and I'm ready to work hard and completely put my whole self into a mission. So when I go to India, I'm gonna figure it out. It's gonna be okay. And I know that people pay people if you do good work. You get more money. So and worse comes to worse, I have a great experience or a bad experience, but I learn a lot in that process. And I come back to America and I'll figure it out. And so I think what I'm glad I don't do is I'm looking at A and I'm looking at Z and I'm thinking, oh my God, if everything falls apart at Z, I'm done. But you just take baby steps. And you realize that there's nothing that's gonna it's not gloom and doom. It's just it's black or white. It's just gray. You're just gonna. And I didn't also have an attachment to I'm gonna go to India and I'm gonna become the president of All India Football Federation in 5 years. Fine, if I did, great. But I just want to make an impact in India. Let me first get my feet wet the first year. The second year, let me see if I can make some friends. And the third year, let me see if I can learn. And fourth year, fifth year, whatever, let me see if I do something meaningful. So I was taking it slow and surprising myself along the way of how easy things were actually when everyone told me that wasn't going to work out. So sorry, a little bit longer answer, but it was all about self-inventory and taking baby steps.
Right, right. No, often at times, experiencing my friends going into careers, going abroad, they too tend to get overwhelmed, and this would be a perfect advice. Baby steps at time. You will get there. So my next question to you, would be Mr. Deepak. So your book centers around golf. Why especially choose golf? Like, what is the one thing about the sport that you admired and learned, making you believe a book can be built around it?
Yes, it's just that golf is an extraordinary game, and it's so different from every other game. Every other game, it's a duel. It's you against somebody else. It's you fighting for the same ball or the same shuttlecock or chasing the same ball or whatever, and then putting the ball into somebody else's goal or hitting the balls so that the other person can't stop it or whatever. Now, golf doesn't have any of that competition. It is not a duel. It's not a fight. No one can impact your performance other than you. In fact, every player plays with his own ball and own golf clubs and hits the ball, his own ball, from the putting green, from the start to the end of the golf course, without anyone else uh, coming in his way. And while he's playing his ball, the others stop and watch him. So, in the true sense, this is not a competition at all, and that's why golf is a very extraordinary game. Now, many people say that successful people and people at the top are playing golf. I sometimes look through that and I find that golf probably has helped many of those to become successful, because they've learned certain lessons of life which only golf can teach, which other games unfortunately do not teach. The other games put us into head-to-head competition with others. Golf constantly reminds you that your only competition is you and yourself, no one else. And I think that is what draws me to the game. I'm not a professional player. I just love the game. I'm more of a student of the game, and I just enjoy the format, the way it is played.
Right, like throughout the session, we can definitely understand your love for the golf and definitely how much you admire the sports. So now, my last question to you would be Miss Anira. So individuals often express boredom, but cite feeling tired, lacking motivation, and having limited time, try something new. So, what guidance would you offer to manage these challenges and discover the motivation needed to break free from the cycles of boredom? Like even I, experienced it after my day job. Like even if I tend to try to, learn something new, when I go home, like I'm all tired and lack motivation. So, what would be your, insight into this?
I think also, if you're tired and you lack motivation, that itself is, is a red alarm, right? It's a red alert, because definitely you're doing something that you don't want to do. Like if you're in a game of golf and you're walking miles and miles, it is physically fatiguing. But if you love it so much, if you're one with it, you don't even sense the fatigue, right? So that itself is, an indicator of, and that's really the point to ask, are you doing something that you don't want to do, firstly? Uh, Secondly, I think, my whole journey with boredom actually began in the pandemic. Where we were all confined and we were living very different lives, right? And the only one thing I heard everyone say was, I'm bored. And it was almost like a symphony, right? And that's when I said, like, hey, can we do something about it? Let's understand it. It's not about having a packed schedule. It's about, when you don't have a packed schedule, are you really bored with yourself? Those are the things, those are the questions, right? And that's the journey to make, right? And it's really your relationship with boredom that decides everything, right? If you use it as a trigger for creativity, like Deepak said, it will lead to a lot of ideas and new thoughts and, new creativity, right? But if your relationship with boredom is about, I am worthless, then it will sink you into a different domain. And your question actually brings to mind when I first started meditation, and I was kind of asked to, and my teacher and I had the same complaint, right? I don't have the time, how do I make time for this meditation? And he just looked at me and he said, if you meditate, you will have more time. I never understood it, right? It took me many, many years to really understand that. So that would be my guidance, right? That when you actually make time for yourself, right? And you're doing something for yourself, it actually unleashes so much energy, so much of productive, positive energy, that it actually kind of, things just fall in place magically. So it's like a vicious cycle, right? But you need to break that. And the moment you choose to break that, everything else is sorted. You know what I mean? Because when you pay
Mhm.
attention to yourself, everything else is sorted, right? Uh, so it's you with you that needs to get sorted, right? The rest just falls in place. So for me, uh, and that's been my experience. It took me many years to understand what my teacher actually was trying to tell me. But then having experienced it, I understood what it meant to really pay attention to yourself and take that effort, right? And then it's just that first time, right, where you need to break that, boredom and, that inertia. But once you do that, you realize, oh my God, why did I wait so long? You know. So yeah, for me, that would be my take and my advice to just break the cycle. You know.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much for your guidance. And with that, we come to the end of the session. Thank you so much, Neera ji, Deepak ji, Neel ji, for sharing
Thank
your
you.
valuable insights and expertise. It has helped me personally, and I definitely hope so it would benefit our listeners and our audience. With that, thank you so much from the Pragati Vichar Literature family, and we do hope to see you more in our future events. With that, we bid farewell to this session. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.